You know what they say about family weddings? They're supposed to be about love, unity, bringing people together. What they don't tell you is that sometimes they're just a spotlight on everything that's broken, everything that's been ignored, everything that's been swept under the rug for years. I'm Maya Patel, and this is the story of how I went from invisible to viral to destroyed to, well, you'll see. But I need to warn you up front. This isn't one of those feel-good stories where everything works out perfectly in the end. This is about what happens when the truth comes out, and nobody's ready for it. It starts at my brother's wedding. I'm standing there in a simple navy dress, nothing fancy, nothing that would draw attention. I learned a long time ago that in my family, it's better to blend into the background. Safer that way. I'd paid for half this wedding, but nobody knew that. Nobody needed to know that. That's just what Maya does. She handles things quietly, pays for things quietly, fixes things quietly. The bride, Lydia, she's had a few too many glasses of champagne, and she's feeling bold, feeling like she owns the room. And maybe she does. It's her day after all. 200 guests, all eyes on her, all celebrating her perfect fairy tale moment. She looks at me, standing there minding my own business, and she laughs. This sharp, cutting laugh that slices through the reception chatter. "Still single, Maya?" she says, loud enough for everyone to hear. Guess not everyone gets a fairy tale. The laughter that follows, God, it still echoes in my ears. 200 people laughing at the spinster sister who couldn't even manage to catch a bouquet, let alone a husband. The responsible one, the reliable one, the one who never caused drama, never made waves, never asked for anything. But then something happened that I didn't expect. Everyone was laughing, everyone except her groom, my brother Ethan. His smile just vanished, like someone had flipped a switch. He stood up slowly, and when he spoke, his voice was different, cold, controlled. "Say that again, carefully." The entire hall went silent. You could hear the clink of silverware being set down, the rustle of fabric as people shifted in their seats. Lydia's laugh died in her throat. See, what nobody in that room knew, what I didn't even know at the time, was that Ethan recognized something in me that night, something that connected us in a way that went far deeper than family obligation or wedding etiquette. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and tell you who I really am, because that's the only way this story makes sense. I'm 34 years old, and I've spent most of my life being the person everyone else could count on. When our parents' marriage fell apart in spectacular fashion, Dad's gambling, Mom's drinking, the screaming matches that went on for hours, I was the one who made sure Ethan had clean clothes for school, had lunch money, had someone to sign his permission slips. I was 16, he was 12, and I became more of a parent to him than our actual parents ever were. I joined the Air Force right after high school, partly for the education benefits, partly because I needed to get out of that house before it suffocated me completely. I trained as a trauma medic, worked on rescue flights, saw things that most people can't even imagine: blood, chaos, people hanging on to life by threads so thin you wonder how they don't snap. But you know what I learned in the military? I learned that in crisis moments, when everything is falling apart and people are panicking, there's power in being the calm voice, the steady presence, the one who doesn't break. When I came back home after my service, I kept doing what I knew how to do. I became a trauma medic for emergency rescue flights, combat trained, specialized in extracting wounded soldiers from live fire zones. Not exactly the kind of job you brag about at family dinners, because how do you explain what it's like to hold someone's life in your hands while bullets are flying overhead? My family treated me like I was still that quiet 16-year-old who handled everything without complaint. They didn't ask about my work, didn't ask about my life, didn't seem particularly interested in who I'd become. I was dependable Maya, background noise Maya, the one who showed up when she was needed and disappeared when she wasn't. And maybe that was partly my fault. Maybe I never fought hard enough to be seen, to be heard, to matter. In my family, love was loud, passionate arguments, dramatic reconciliations, big gestures, and bigger emotions. And I was quiet. I was stability in a family that thrived on chaos. So when Ethan announced his engagement to Lydia, I was happy for him, genuinely happy. She was everything I wasn't: outgoing, social, the kind of person who filled up a room just by walking into it. And he seemed to love that about her. I helped plan the wedding. I listened to her complaints about vendors, about his family, about everything that was going wrong. I wrote a check for half the reception costs without being asked, because I could see the stress in his eyes when they were trying to figure out how to afford the wedding she wanted. I never expected gratitude. I never expected acknowledgement. I just expected to fade into the background on their big day, the way I always did. But Lydia had other plans. After she made her comment about me being single, after the laughter died down and Ethan's warning hung in the air, she couldn't just let it go. The alcohol, the attention, the power of being the center of everyone's universe. It all went to her head. She looked at me with this smug smile and said, "Oh, come on. What do you even do now? Ambulance secretary?" Ambulance secretary. Like my years of training, my service record, my license to save lives was just some glorified desk job. Like everything I'd sacrificed, everything I'd learned, everything I'd become was just a cute little hobby. And for the first time in my life, I didn't stay quiet. "Actually," I said, and my voice was steady, controlled, professional. "I fly air ambulances, combat trained. I've saved soldiers in live fire zones." The murmur that went through the crowd was different this time. Surprised, impressed, maybe, like they were seeing me for the first time. But Ethan went pale, like he'd seen a ghost. He whispered something to Lydia that I couldn't hear, but whatever it was made her face change. The smugness disappeared, replaced by confusion, then something that looked like fear. She tried to laugh it off, but it sounded forced now, brittle. That's when Ethan stood up again and said the words that changed everything. "She's the reason I'm standing here alive." The silence that followed was different, heavier. You could feel the confusion rippling through the room. Guests looking at each other, trying to make sense of what they'd just heard. I was confused too. What was he talking about? I'd never saved his life. I'd never even been on a mission with him. He wasn't military, never had been. But the way he was looking at me, like he knew something I didn't, like there was a story there that I wasn't seeing. The rest of the reception was awkward, tense. Conversations died when I walked by. People stared. Lydia spent most of the evening locked in the bridal suite, and Ethan looked like he was at a funeral instead of his own wedding. I left early, drove home to my small apartment, poured myself a large glass of wine, and tried to forget the whole thing ever happened. But the internet had other plans. Someone, multiple someones actually, had filmed the confrontation. By the time I woke up the next morning, there was a video titled "Bride Mocks Her Groom's Rescuer" that had been viewed over 1 million times. The comments were brutal. Not for me, for Lydia. People were calling her entitled, privileged, ungrateful. They were calling me a hero, a badass, someone who deserved better than being mocked by some spoiled bride. It should have felt good, I guess, being defended, being seen. Finally having strangers recognize what my own family had ignored for years. Instead, it felt like a violation. My private humiliation had become public entertainment. The media picked up the story. Local news, then national, then international. The medic who saved a stranger and met him again at his wedding. They wanted interviews, background, photos from my military service. I said no to all of it. I'm not built for that kind of attention. I never have been. But my family was furious. Not at Lydia for humiliating me. Not at themselves for years of treating me like I was invisible. They were angry at me for making a scene at the wedding, for embarrassing Lydia, for letting it go viral. My mother called me crying, saying I'd ruined Ethan's wedding. My father accused me of being selfish, of always needing to be the center of attention. The irony of that accusation, coming from a man who'd gambled away our house when I was 17, wasn't lost on me. Even Ethan was distant, apologetic about what happened, but distant, like he was afraid of what people might think if he was seen supporting me. That's when the real pain hit. Not the public humiliation, not the viral video, not the media attention. It was the realization that even when the whole world was finally seeing me, my own family still couldn't. They saw my heroism as a scandal, my service as an embarrassment, my dignity as drama. 3 days after the wedding, Ethan showed up at my apartment. He looked like he hadn't slept since the reception. And when I opened the door, he just stood there for a long moment, staring at me. "We need to talk," he said. I made coffee, and we sat at my small kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with homework 20 years ago, where I'd listened to him cry about our parents' divorce, where I'd promised him things would get better even when I didn't believe it myself. "That rescue," he said quietly, 3 years ago. It wasn't random. I didn't understand what he meant. 3 years ago, I'd flown dozens of rescue missions, pulled wounded soldiers out of combat zones, carried them to safety, watched some of them live and some of them die. It was my job. It was what I did. "You pulled out my best friend," he continued. "Marcus, my college roommate, my business partner, the guy who was going to be my best man before—" The words hit me like a physical blow. Marcus. I remembered Marcus. Young kid, barely 22, caught in an IED explosion outside Kandahar. Massive internal bleeding, crush injuries to his legs. I'd worked on him for 40 minutes while we flew him to the nearest trauma center. He didn't make it. "He talked about you," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "In the helicopter while you were working on him. He was conscious for some of it, and he kept talking about the calm voice on the radio, the woman who promised to bring them home." I remember that flight. I remember Marcus fighting to stay conscious, asking about his unit, asking if everyone was okay. I remember telling him over and over that he was going to be fine, that we were almost there, that help was waiting. I lied. We both knew I was lying. But sometimes lies are the kindest thing you can offer someone who's dying. "He died holding on to your promise," Ethan whispered. And I've carried that guilt ever since, that my best friend died believing someone who couldn't save him. The revelation hit me like shrapnel. All this time, I'd been connected to Ethan's life in a way I never knew. All this time, he'd been carrying the weight of a loss that I'd been part of, a grief that I'd contributed to without knowing it. "When you said you were combat trained at the wedding," he continued, "when you mentioned the rescue flights, I knew it was you." The voice Marcus described, the medic who stayed calm while his world was falling apart. We sat in silence for a long time after that. "What do you say to someone whose best friend died in your helicopter? What do you say to someone who's been looking at you for years, seeing not his sister, but the last person to speak to his dying friend? Why didn't you tell me? I asked finally. Because I was angry, he admitted. For years, I was angry at you for not saving him, for promising him something you couldn't deliver. And then, when I got to know you better, when I saw who you really are, I was angry at myself for blaming you. The guilt in his voice was devastating. Here was my little brother, the one I'd raised, the one I'd protected, carrying this burden alone for 3 years, blaming himself for blaming me for something that was nobody's fault. Marcus knew, I said quietly. They always know. When I tell them they're going to be okay, when I promise to bring them home, they know I can't guarantee that. But they also know I'm going to fight like hell to try. I know that now, Ethan said. I should have known it then. But the damage was done. Not just between us, but in the wider world that was watching our story unfold. Because while Ethan and I were having this conversation, while we were finally addressing the grief and guilt that had been hanging between us for years, Lydia was spiraling. The viral video had destroyed her social media presence. Her friends were distancing themselves. Her job, she worked in PR, and having your name associated with publicly humiliating a military veteran wasn't exactly good for business. She was drowning in shame and anger, and she decided to take me down with her. I don't know how she got access to my military records. Probably called in favors. Maybe bribed someone, maybe just lied her way into information she had no right to see. But somehow, she got hold of documentation from the mission where Marcus died. And she leaked it to the media with her own interpretation. The story that came out was devastating. According to Lydia's version, I was a reckless medic who had violated protocol during the rescue mission. She painted me as someone who took unnecessary risks, who prioritized heroics over proper procedure, who was responsible for Marcus's death through negligence and ego. The leaked documents were real, but they were incomplete. They showed the official inquiry that followed Marcus's death, standard procedure for any KIA in a rescue operation, but they didn't show the conclusion. They didn't show that I'd been cleared of any wrongdoing, that the inquiry had found my actions appropriate and professional. They just showed that there had been an investigation, and in the court of public opinion, an investigation means guilt. The media that had been calling me a hero for a week suddenly turned on me. Was the viral hero a fraud? The dark truth behind the wedding rescue story. Military medic under investigation for soldier's death. My phone rang constantly, reporters wanting my side of the story, former colleagues asking if the allegations were true, family members demanding to know why I hadn't told them about any of this. I couldn't answer. I couldn't explain. Because the truth was classified, the full records were sealed, and I wasn't allowed to discuss the details of the mission publicly. All I could do was watch my reputation, my career, my life get destroyed by half-truths and deliberate misrepresentations. The licensing board suspended my medical certification pending their own investigation. The air ambulance service put me on indefinite leave. The foundation I'd been working with to help other veterans cut ties with me to protect their own reputation. In the space of 2 weeks, I went from invisible to viral to destroyed. And my family? My family went silent, not just distant this time, silent. My mother stopped returning my calls. My father changed his phone number. Extended family members blocked me on social media. Even Ethan, who knew the truth about Marcus, who understood what really happened on that helicopter, pulled away. The pressure from Lydia, the media attention, the strain on their new marriage, it was too much. I'd spent my life saving others, and now I couldn't even save my own name. The isolation was crushing. Sitting in my apartment, watching my life get dissected on television by people who'd never been in combat, never held a dying soldier, never had to make split-second decisions while bullets were flying overhead. They called me reckless. They called me egotistical. They called me a fraud. And for a while, in the darkest moments, I started to believe them. Maybe I had been reckless. Maybe I had let my ego drive my decisions. Maybe Marcus would be alive if I'd done something different, been faster, been better. The guilt that I'd carried for 3 years, the guilt that every combat medic carries for the ones they can't save, became overwhelming. It consumed everything: my sleep, my appetite, my ability to function. I found myself replaying that flight over and over, analyzing every decision, every action, every word I'd said to Marcus as he lay dying in my helicopter. Had I given him false hope? Had I been cruel to promise him things I couldn't deliver? Had I focused too much on keeping him calm and not enough on keeping him alive? The questions tormented me, and the worst part was, I had no one to talk to about them. No one who understood what it was like to be responsible for someone's life in those conditions. No one who knew the weight of those decisions. I was completely alone. That's when I decided to fight back. Not for my reputation. That seemed beyond saving at that point. Not for my career. I wasn't sure I wanted to go back to rescue flights anyway, not with this cloud hanging over me. I decided to fight for the truth. For Marcus, for the other soldiers who died in my helicopter, whose deaths were being weaponized to destroy me. I hired a lawyer, used most of my savings to do it, and we filed a request for the full military records to be declassified. We challenged the licensing board's suspension. We went after Lydia for defamation and for illegally accessing confidential military information. It took 4 months of legal battles, but eventually the truth came out. The full investigation records showed what really happened on that helicopter. Marcus had been critically injured before we even arrived on scene. The IED explosion had caused massive internal bleeding that was already beyond surgical repair. My quick response had actually kept him alive longer than should have been medically possible. The inquiry had not only cleared me of wrongdoing, it had commended my actions under extreme circumstances. The report specifically noted my exceptional composure and clinical skill under direct enemy fire. When the real records were released, when the full story came out, the media coverage shifted again. But this time, I didn't care about vindication. I didn't care about being called a hero again, because the damage was done, not just to my reputation, but to my relationships, my sense of self, my ability to trust. The licensing board reinstated my certification, but I didn't go back to flying. The air ambulance service offered me my job back, but I turned them down. I was tired of being the calm voice while everything around me fell apart. Tired of saving people who couldn't save me when I needed them most. When I confronted Lydia about the leaked records, about the lies she'd told, about the way she'd tried to destroy my life to save her own reputation, I expected defiance. I expected her to double down, to justify what she'd done. Instead, I found someone who was just as broken as I was. She'd lost her job. Her marriage to Ethan was falling apart. Turns out he wasn't okay with his wife trying to destroy his sister, even if he'd been too scared to defend me publicly. Her friends had abandoned her. Her family was ashamed of her, and she was facing potential criminal charges for illegally accessing my military records. I was jealous, she admitted, sitting in her lawyer's office during our mediation. You were everything I wasn't: brave, accomplished, respected, and at my own wedding, you made me feel small. So you tried to destroy me, I said. I tried to destroy the pedestal everyone had put you on, she corrected. I wanted people to see that you weren't perfect, that you'd made mistakes too. The thing is, she was right. I had made mistakes. Every medic has. Every soldier has. Every person who's ever been in a situation where life and death decisions have to be made in seconds has made mistakes. But that didn't give her the right to weaponize my worst moments against me. I've spent enough of my life fighting to be seen, I told her. Maybe it's time to stand still and forgive. I didn't forgive her for her sake. I forgave her for mine, because carrying that anger, that hurt, that need for revenge, it was eating me alive. The legal consequences were hers to face. The criminal charges for accessing confidential records, the civil lawsuit for defamation, the professional repercussions, all of that would follow its own course. But the personal forgiveness, that was my choice to make. It didn't fix everything. It didn't undo the damage to my relationships, the months of isolation, the questions about my competence that would probably follow me forever. But it freed me from the weight of hating her. And that was something. Lydia eventually faced the consequences of her actions. She was convicted of illegally accessing government records and sentenced to community service. She and Ethan divorced, not just because of what she'd done to me, but because of what it revealed about who she really was. She got therapy, started volunteering with veteran support organizations, trying to make amends for the damage she'd caused. I heard she was good at it, actually, that her experience with public humiliation and social destruction gave her insight into helping others who were struggling. I didn't go back to flying. Instead, I used the settlement money from the defamation lawsuit to start something new, the Rescue Within Foundation, an organization focused on helping women veterans transition back to civilian life, dealing with the unique challenges we face in a system and a society that often doesn't know what to do with female soldiers. We focus on emotional rescue, not physical, helping women find their voices, their purpose, their place in a world that often sees military service as inherently masculine. The viral video that had started this whole nightmare became an unexpected asset. The calm voice became a brand, a platform, a way to reach women who needed to hear that their service mattered, that their struggles were valid, that they weren't alone. I started speaking at events, sharing my story, not just the rescue missions and the combat experience, but the aftermath, the way society celebrates military service in the abstract while ignoring the real ongoing needs of veterans, the way trauma doesn't end when you take off the uniform. The audience that had watched my humiliation and destruction online came back to watch my rebuilding. They followed the Foundation's work, donated to our programs, shared their own stories of resilience and recovery. Ethan and I eventually reconciled. It took time, a lot of time, and therapy, and honest conversations about the way our family dynamics had shaped us both. He'd been carrying guilt about Marcus for 3 years, and I'd been carrying guilt about every soldier I couldn't save. We'd both been drowning in it, letting it poison our relationship without even realizing it. Some heroes don't need medals, he wrote in a post about the Foundation's work. They need to be heard. That became our motto, because I'd learned something through all of this, something painful but necessary. You don't have to fly to be free. Sometimes flying means letting go of the need to be seen by people who are determined not to see you, letting go of the idea that your worth is determined by other people's recognition, letting go of the belief that you have to save everyone, including the people who are trying to destroy you. I still work in rescue, just a different kind. I help women find their way back to themselves after combat, after trauma, after society tells them that their strength isn't the right kind of strength. I'm still the calm voice. I'm still the steady presence. But now I use that not just to keep people alive in crisis moments, but to help them build lives worth living afterward. The viral fame faded, as viral fame always does. The media moved on to other stories, other scandals, other heroes and villains to build up and tear down. But the work remains. The foundation remains. The women who need someone to remind them that they matter, that their service counted, that their struggles are valid, they remain. And I remain. Not invisible anymore, not background noise, not the reliable one who handles everything quietly. I'm the one who speaks up now, who tells the truth, even when it's complicated, who refuses to disappear just because it would be more comfortable for everyone else. My family still doesn't entirely know what to do with me. They're proud of the foundation's work, proud of the recognition it's received, but they still seem surprised that Quiet Maya turned out to have so much to say. But that's okay. I'm not doing this for them anymore. I'm not doing it for recognition or redemption or to prove anything to anyone. I'm doing it because someone needs to be the calm voice for the women who are fighting battles that nobody else can see. Someone needs to remind them that survival isn't just about making it through the crisis. It's about building something meaningful from what comes after. And maybe that's what heroism really looks like. Not the dramatic moments, not the life or death decisions, not the viral videos or media attention. Maybe heroism is showing up day after day for the work that nobody films, the conversations that nobody broadcasts, the healing that happens quietly, privately, without fanfare or recognition. Maybe heroism is choosing to forgive when you have every right to hate, choosing to build when it would be easier to destroy, choosing to speak when staying silent would be safer. I don't know if that makes me a hero. I don't know if any of this makes me anything more than someone who survived something difficult and decided to help others do the same. But I know this: every woman who walks through our foundation's doors, every veteran who finds her voice again, every person who learns that their story matters, they teach me something new about courage. Not the courage to run toward danger, though that's important too. The courage to sit with pain and transform it into purpose. The courage to let yourself be seen, really seen, even when it's terrifying. The courage to be your own rescue. That's what I learned from all of this. From the wedding, from the viral video, from the destruction and rebuilding, from Marcus's death and Lydia's cruelty and my family's silence. You can't always control what happens to you. You can't control how people see you or what they choose to believe about you. You can't control whether they recognize your worth or acknowledge your sacrifice or treat you with the respect you've earned. But you can control how you respond. You can control whether you let their blindness become your invisibility. You can control whether you use your pain as a weapon or as fuel. You can control whether you become bitter or whether you become better. I chose better, not because I'm particularly noble or wise or evolved. I chose better because the alternative, staying angry, staying hurt, staying small, was slowly killing me, and I'd spent too many years saving other people's lives to waste my own on resentment. So that's my story. That's how I went from the invisible sister to the viral hero, to the destroyed veteran to this, whatever this is. I'm still figuring it out, still learning how to be seen without being consumed by the attention, still learning how to use my voice without drowning out other people's, still learning how to save people while saving myself. But I'm not doing it alone anymore. I'm not the only calm voice in the storm. Every day, more women find their voices. Every day, more veterans learn that their stories matter. Every day, more people choose courage over comfort, truth over convenience, healing over hatred. And maybe that's the real rescue. Not pulling people out of immediate danger, but helping them build lives where they don't need rescuing anymore, where they can be their own calm voice in the storm, where they can fly without leaving themselves behind. If my story reminds you that forgiveness doesn't mean weakness, that heroism comes in many forms, that your voice matters even when, especially when, others try to silence it, then maybe all of this was worth it. Maybe the wedding humiliation, the viral fame, the destruction and rebuilding. Maybe it was all just the beginning of something bigger, something that matters, something that lasts. Because no one rescues alone, and everyone deserves to be heard, even the quiet ones, especially the quiet ones. Your story matters here. Your voice matters here. Your rescue matters here. And if you're still looking for your calm voice in the storm, if you're still learning how to fly without losing yourself, if you're still figuring out how to transform your pain into purpose, you're not alone. I promise you that. And unlike the promises I made to Marcus on that helicopter 3 years ago, this is one I can keep.